Hey, it's John, and welcome to the interview. Today, I am joined by Jamie Schneiderman, who is the founder and CEO of CareerSpark, which is the leader in predictive career mobility that helps organizations to understand what drives success and to easily and consistently select, develop, and promote top talent. Jamie believes that job performance depends on people working in the roles they were built to succeed in. And today we're going to be talking a bit about how you as a leader can find the right spots for your top talent. So Jamie, thanks so much for coming by today.
Thanks, John. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, just give the listeners a Reader's Digest version of the life of Jamie up to this point. And
Okay, it's Life of Jamie.
Keep it PG, huh?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, so look, I started my career, I'm a business guy. It's where I've always come from, but I started my career working at some very big company, guys that, most people have heard of, and I went to a fancy school to get my MBA. So everything on paper that I did growing up or starting off, I should say, my career looked great on paper and was great from an experiential perspective, but really spent most of my time frustrated with what I was doing. Really wasn't the right thing for me. Knew that it wasn't the right career, knew that's not what I should do. So as good as it looked, as nice as it is on paper, it's just not really me and what I should be doing. And it took me a little while to figure out that I was an entrepreneur. That's what I should be doing. I'm here to kind of solve problems, tackle issues, find inefficiencies and go after them. And that's really, it's interesting because it's that past and that pain that I had that really set me on the path to doing what I'm doing today.
Yeah, you kind of scratched your own itch, as many entrepreneurs do, right? You were the classic avatar for what's now your current business, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very cool. So we'll talk about CareerSpark in a second because I think it's really neat what you're doing there. But first, let's talk a little more broadly about finding your right career and those kind of things. Because you said yourself that you went through some of these same pain points where you're stuck in a position maybe you didn't like, or it's not filling you up, or it's not allowing you to spread your wings and be your best self. How can people increase their odds of finding the right spot, the right career, the right business for themselves?
Yeah, I think so. There's a common issue that exists, which is that, we tend to look at ourselves and what we should be doing in the context of what we've done. And we almost typecast ourselves. And the same goes the other way. And I know, but specifically, even just looking at individuals and thinking about what individuals are doing, the tendency is for someone to say, well, I went to business school, or I worked, if I worked in consumer packaged goods. So that's what you are. Well, that's not what I am. That's what I've done. And I think too often people lose sight of what do they really want to do. And always, anytime I meet with somebody, anytime we're talking about their career and where to go, the first place I start with is, what do you want? And people are thrown, right? I even do it in interviews. So what do you want to do? Like, I thought I was here for a job. Like, yeah, but before we start talking about what job and whether this is the right place for you, I want to know what you want. What are you looking for? What's important to you? What do you want to be? And too often that question isn't the first question that everyone's asking. And so to me, it's always start with what you want. Always start with what you enjoy or what you love doing. And then once you know what that is, now go back and look at the things that you've done. Now go back at the things that you have experience or skills in and try to craft those things and shape those things and position those things to set you on a path to do the things that you really badly want to do. And of course, there may be things that you need to go and learn and experience that you haven't done before, but now you've got a plan. Now you've got kind of a path to head down, and it becomes a lot clearer to craft that path versus just, I've always done this, so therefore that's what I am.
Yeah, that's a good distinction, because I think we tend to have a hindsight bias in our own lives, right? Of like, this is who I am and what I've done, so therefore I can't be anything different, right? And we tend to paint ourselves as that kind of person, that our past self is who we are for now and forever, and that's often not the case. What's your stance on the whole passion thing? Because some people say follow your passion, and there's the other side of the argument that's don't follow your passion. Like Cal Newport wrote a book, Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. And he talks about the passion trap and how building career capital is really the way to lead and open up into passion projects down the road. Seems to be different sides on that topic. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I'm sure for different people it's worked out in different ways, but I would always say start with passion. It's a funny thing, right? I've often quoted, 70% of people are in the wrong jobs, which is like 125 million people in North America, right? So this is epidemic kind of information. It's nuts. And they're in the wrong jobs and they're not happy. And so engagement levels are low and interest levels are low. I'm highlighting these things because there's a reason that people are moving all the time. There's a reason that there's turnover and churn and sort of this dissatisfaction level. So what we've always looked at is, well, if you're doing something you're passionate about, you will do it better and you will do it for longer. And that isn't my opinion, that there's actually facts and data that supports that point. So to me, it's if work cannot feel like work, right? As little as possible, right? We spend more time working than doing anything else. So if you can spend that time doing things that you really love doing, you're going to do them better and you're going to want to do them longer. It's not going to have the kind of grating negative feeling that it has. So I feel strongly that everyone should start there and try to go as far as they can down the passion path. I appreciate that sometimes practicality and reality gets in the way of those things at times, and you may have to make some detours along the way. We all have, but I really say start there and know what that is, because it'll always help to realign things as you get off track.
I think even Aristotle, he had a quote, I think, that said that passion puts perfection in the work. Something like that. I could be misquoting him a little bit, but yeah, I think that makes sense, right? If you're excited about something, you're engaged with it, you're obviously going to do better at it. It's just the reality of the world. Is it more that you feel just that people are placed in the wrong jobs, or is it management or leadership that's causing them to disengage from their positions?
Yeah. So there's the other side of this, right? So, you asked me to begin with around people, what should they be doing? Well, there's a whole other piece, which is what are companies, organizations doing? And organizations have been looking at this and looking at people the wrong way for a long time, right? The same problems that exist with people, and I actually think it starts with organizations where people don't necessarily want to look at themselves based on what they've done. And I'll often hear what I've done isn't who I am and what I'm capable of doing, but organizations still go, yeah, but what you've done is who you are and what you're capable of doing. And they try to use this past performance or past experience as the best indicator of the future. And that's actually completely not true, right? So again, data shows that there's very, very little correlation between what you've done in the past and whether or not you can or will be successful doing something in the future. That experience can be relevant, but that alone is not an indication of future success. And that's the mistake that organizations fall into. They see very little way or very little, hard facts or objective ways to go about getting the right person into the right job to begin with. And so they jump to the things that they think make sense. So-and-so went to this fancy school, or so-and-so's done this job before. And they move to, strategies like poaching and other, from competitors. The reality is that works out as well as every other way of finding people. In fact, it's usually a worse way of recruiting people or bringing people on board, in that it's highly non-predictive. And so, we can get into, you asked about management and leadership styles and things. To me, these are all part and parcel. If you bring a person in to the right environment, into the right role and organization in the first place, everything that you then do with them beyond that has a much higher probability of succeeding. And again, a portion of that is, this is the type of organization we have. Don't be a company that says we're really innovative and we're really creative when you're really just not. Like, you're conservative and slow and structured, and that's fine, but don't tell people you're something else. Be who you are, and you'll attract the right kinds of people for you. And then, of course, I always look at it and go, what is it that's actually succeeding in your organization? Look at what's really succeeding, not what you believe could be or should be succeeding. And if you actually understood what it is, now you have a much better chance of being successful. But organizations rarely take that into account the way they should.
Yeah. So what are some ways these organizations and leaders, and I know we'll talk about your software, CareerSpark, in a second as well, and kind of what you're doing there. But, is it mostly is it really because if we can't use the person's past or the resume is a key predictor, is it more like, assessments or like personality stuff, or like how can leaders and organizations really filter people and make sure that they get into the right spot that they feel the most productive and happy with?
Yeah. And I think it's important. So I'd say that the most important thing is objective information, right? So that's the way to think about this. And let's set aside which exactly information for a second. And first things first, there's way too much opinion as it relates to people and work, right? So a job description is usually driven by a number of people sitting down and coming up with what they believe is success. Or you get down to a manager or an individual picking and choosing people, again, based on their own personal opinion of that person. And we get away from as much objectivity and as much data as we can. So that's the first piece. And then the second one is, well, what data should we be looking at? How do you think about data? I wasn't suggesting that resume data, past experience, education, skills are not relevant. They are relevant. They're just not they're not the whole story. And the more information you have, the better. To me, I always look at it as two pieces. What have you done and who are you, right? Mm-hmm. Because both of those factor into it. So who you are tells me what kind of environment you can operate in, what types of roles are right for you, whether you have the capacity to succeed. What you've done tells me, is there proof that you've done that? Do you have the skills or experience already? Can you hit the ground running, assuming you're right for it? The problem is if you do only what you've done, the problem there is context, right? So I've done the exact same job at another company, okay, but it's not the same job. It's the same title. The job could be completely different. The organization's different. The comp structure is different. The administrative structure is different. All of those components are different, so you can't transfer one over to the other the same. And you really need to think about it. I've often used an analogy. It's like a penguin. And you look at a penguin in water and they're swimming around and they're successful and they're fast and they're catching fish, and it's amazing how graceful they are. And that's sort of like an individual in a job today. That's what they're doing. Well, and then all of a sudden you take that same penguin and take them out of the water, put them on land, and they're bumbling around and stumbling, and they're not very coordinated, and they can barely move. And it's the same animal in two different environments, the same as with a person. You just take them out of the environment that's right for them, where they're super successful, and put them in another environment. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this is the wrong place. And now that person's struggling. Well, it's the same person. We often say, oh, this person's no longer a top performer. Well, what does that mean? Or they're no longer high performance material. Well, that's ridiculous. It's the same person. All that's changed is the context. And we need to create and look at data sets. That's what organizations need to do, that consider the context. This is the context of success, which is why, for us, it's the way we think about it, but I think what organizations need to do, which is, how do you objectively look at what's driving success today? And what's always key in doing that is, what is it about your top performing people in any one job that's causing them to outperform everyone else? If you understand that, you now have an objective framework for defining success going forward for every one of your jobs, at least for the time being.
Right. And that's a big part of what you're doing at CareerSpark, right? Is providing objective data and measures for people. So let's talk a little bit about your software and where people can find out more about it. I believe it's CareerSpark.com. Is that
That's correct? Yeah.
Yes. CareerSpark.com. We'll link up below the video as well on the page here. But for everybody listening, CareerSpark.com is where you can find out more about it. But yeah, go ahead and just share a little bit about that, because it's pretty cool when I saw it, and maybe you could probably put it in better words than I would, but share a little bit about what you're doing there.
Sure. Well, it's interesting because it lines up with my background and a lot of the conversations we've had around, I had pain, I was frustrated, I was in the wrong job. And I knew it. And I went out to try to find the right job. And I talked to other people and discovered that most people are in the same place as me. So that was the problem I saw. And so we set out with a mission of how do we get the right people into the right jobs. And that was sort of the mission. It's still the mission today. And all we've done is sort of build around that mission, to add in things like how do we make more decisions around people in a better way. And so, CareerSpark, it's interesting. I started with CareerSpark around how do you get the right people in the right jobs. You start realizing that companies are just terrible at people decisions. They're just not good at them. And people are the most important things in business. It's like, okay, well, if we spend more time working than doing anything else while we're awake, and people are critical at work, shouldn't we be right? Should we be getting this right? And so sort of we set our focus as an organization to try to fix a lot of these things. And so what we do is we take a complete set of data around both what people have done and who they are. We combine that information together and we look at top performers, and we can analyze top performers in a completely objective way to understand how those top performers by role for every organization are different than everyone else doing the job today. And so in doing so, what we're able to do is create benchmarks for success. We now know why those people are outperforming everyone else. And now that we've got that, we can then use that information and use those benchmarks for things like career pathing, internal mobility, hiring, and then, identifying gaps and learning and development and other things. So the idea for us is first understand and define success the right way, in an objective way, and then use that same framework for everything that you do so that it can be used and scaled across an entire organization. Most of the companies that we work with are 1,000 or more employees. So we're typically working with larger organizations that have even bigger issues, and they have a lot of systems in place, but they tend to be missing this type of information. And so, we've been doing it for 11 years now. We've had a little over 2 million people go through our system, and with great, fortunately, really great results. And it's something that I believe in very passionately. So it's funny, we're obviously trying to drive success for organizations, but for me, what I always get all my real interest and excitement for is how we can help individuals, right? How much you move the needle for each person.
Yeah.
You find a person the right place, it becomes very exciting for them. They're really happy. It kind of transforms how they look at things.
Yeah, I have a couple follow-up questions what you shared there, because I think it's interesting. For the simple-minded like myself, how does this? I mean, so you actually have this software that's driven by AI, right, and things like that. Like, how does that analyze the? I'm just curious. Like, how does it analyze like a specific organization's optimization or its performance? How does it get into? How does it actually look at that stuff?
Yeah. So no, that's a good question. So I think oftentimes, so every organization and every role in an organization has a different set of, call it, performance metrics or what is success, right? So too often,
yeah.
KPIs, exactly. That's a term we're often using. So, oftentimes there's a conversation with the company that says, who are your best people? And there's a lot of opinion that goes with that. But the real trick to what we're doing is getting away from opinion. So for example, take a role, whatever role that is in an organization, we'll always ask for, what's the list of people you have doing the job today? What are all the KPIs and how are each of them doing against those KPIs? Mm-hmm. Further to that, you may be some companies will give us, ratings or rankings or other ways to look at it. And so now what's happening is we have a picture of what's happening today in the organization. Now there's lots of ways that we can validate and cross-check against that. And I don't want to get into that, but the point is you're working from the most objective, clear data set you can. And now all the system is doing, you talked about AI, machine learning, all these pieces. I mean, I think a lot of those terms get overused, but ultimately it's how do we crunch through massive amounts of data to understand what are the true drivers of success. By looking at those things, you can say who's most successful, right? You now have objective measures for who's most successful. And then now the real question that's most important is why. And so for each one of those employees, we know, what they've done. We know three things about them: what they've done, who they are. So part of that is that we have our own proprietary psychometrics. right? So you talked about personality and things. We have a way that we've done this that allows that to scale. And so we're combining what you've done with that, and then the KPIs that we're talking about. And now all of a sudden, we have a complete picture that says which of those components are most tightly, for simplification, which are most tightly correlated to success, and which things are least likely correlated to success. And now what you're able to do within that is you're able to start defining, these are the factors that most drive success. And therefore, those are the things that we're going to be looking for within people, or training for within people as we go forward.
I get it. So that makes sense. So like so you've done this with like 2 million people or something for a while now. So is it their environment that the employee's in? Is it like the way their desk is set up, or like the, standing desk versus exercise ball they're sitting on, or like, there's probably an infinite number of variables, right? Like that could contribute maybe a little bit to somebody's, attention, their mindset, their performance, all that. So what are a couple of the big ones that you feel are some of the most important?
I think, look, there's sort of two broad groupings, I would say, that we've seen, right? You either have, so let's talk about the who you are and where you come from. So it's funny because you talked about the ball, that you might be sitting on a ball, or is there a plant on their desk? And is it an open office or a closed? Right. So I think there's a lot of things about who you are that dictate the kind of environment, the kind of structure, the kind of organization or role type that works for you, right? So are you open to change, or do you like a structured way of looking at things? Are you creative, or again, do you like to follow process? Are you someone who wants to engage with people, or do you prefer to sit in a dark room and work with numbers or something else? So there's a lot of things that each one of us likes doing and doesn't like. I always think about it as, what do you like to do? What do you not like to do? All right. And so that's sort of that. And a lot of that shows up both in the role type and in the environment. And what we found is that is one piece. The second piece is, what have you done, or what skills do you have? It's funny, a lot of people get very fixated on, do you have industry experience? We found that industry experience and education play a much smaller role than actual skills, right? And skills obviously vary dramatically depending on the role type. If you're writing code, you got to be able to write code. If you're if you're doing something else, if you're a data scientist, you've got to be technical. If you're a customer service person or in sales, believe it or not, what you've done before, your experience, your skills have a much more limited impact in terms of whether you're likely to be successful. So I think what's important, and I didn't highlight it, is our system doesn't just flag those areas. It actually also defines, based on the data, a relative weighting of those components, right? So every role will differ in terms of how important those different components are, both what are the components and how important they are for defining success. Mm-hmm. And that's how we're thinking about a lot of this.
So are you finding that environment is a big factor, or like what are the broad, for the basic layperson, like maybe they run a small business or a larger business like you work with, like what are some of the biggest broad stroke things that people can do to, I guess, help people hit their KPIs more closely?
Yeah, no, and so okay, so if you're talking about a lot of the who you are stuff, right? So if you think about who you are, do you belong in a big company or a small company? Because they're different, right? Do you belong, and within some of our clients, some of the big companies, some of them are, so we work with like banks and insurance companies, and we work with technology companies, very fast-paced technology companies. And so you think about what happens is there's the ready, fire, aim in the technology company, and then there's the ready, aim,
fall asleep, start again.
No, but again, and the people who are there know, like it's a different approach, right? Like so at a lot of banks or insurance organizations, it's not that, it's just we're more conservative. We're going to take our time. We're going to do, and that's their approach. They're operating that way, and they have very successful businesses. Whereas the technology companies, like everything's rush, go. Now, we look at that and we laugh. Some people on your podcast are going to say, well, this is, I don't want slow, or others like, oh, I hate that ready, fire, aim. Well, guess what? Right there, you've predefined which type of organization is right for you. Neither one of them is right or wrong. some are right for certain people and some are right for others. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is just make sure that you get there. So you talk about environment, that's a key part of environment.
Yeah. Right.
And so I can tell you, for example, by looking at your profile, right, the way we do it, I could tell you right away where you should or shouldn't work, the types of roles you should or shouldn't be in, broadly speaking. Ultimately, we want to get to something that's much more tightly predictive, but I'm saying even in broad strokes that we can use the data to even give that kind of direction.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, a lot of it, the pace of the organization, the culture, all that, you know, depending on your personality and all those things are big factors for sure. So very cool. Well, where do you see CareerSpark going in the future here? Like, you guys are working with a lot of big companies already, and I guess what would be the legacy for CareerSpark when it's all said and done?
Well, well, I mean, I'd like, you know, I sort of set out, I'm like, how do we change the world? And the key thing for me is so many people are unhappy at work. So many people have wrong jobs. How do we change that? And I look at it from the perspective of how can we help enable or empower individuals and companies to find the right place for them, or the right people to fit in where they are. And all of a sudden, this what has been a crapshoot around the most important thing that exists for most people, which is most important thing that they do sort of every day, which is work, is a crapshoot, right? And it is a lot of guessing game. How do we transform that? How do we change that and make this into something that becomes more efficient and more meaningful and more predictive, if you like? Because if you can do that, you know, the impact of that is gigantic, both for the individual and their family and how they feel every day, but also from a economic perspective, the benefits are enormous, right? So the inefficiencies caused by people being in the wrong job are massive. So like they're bigger than all inefficiencies in all industries combined, right? There's nothing even close, but we don't feel like we can do anything. So when I start thinking about what could we do, to me, it's how many people can we help and sort of enrich their lives, and then how much impact can we make with organizations and with the economy to really, really transform the way work is done.
Yeah, no, it's a huge problem, right? And I think if you can move that even a percentage point further in the right direction, or more, it sounds like you're doing a lot more than that.
Yeah, well, we're trying.
It's going to be a huge benefit to everybody. So companies will be more profitable, they'll get better workers will have better, you know, lives and job experiences. And it's, like you say, it's the hugest, I think it's, besides maybe sleeping, the biggest part of our lives. And, you know, if you can make that a better part of people's lives, it's going to be, you'll be able to rest easy at the end of your life then, I suppose, knowing that you made a difference in the world. Right? So
that would be the goal.
That's cool. What are you most proud of so far along your journey? I always like to ask this question of successful entrepreneurs and people like yourself.
And so I think I alluded to it before, but you know, oftentimes people think, you know, my kids often talk about, you know, the big accomplishments, but for me, really the things that I'm most proud of are when I've helped individuals. It's really for me about helping a person find their right place, because I know how frustrating it is. I know how difficult it can be, and it's very satisfying. I don't doing it for the someone thanking me, but I've had people, you know, send me a card or see me years later and saying, you know, thanks so much for taking the time, because you really sent me on the right path. And it's really transformed not just my career, but my whole life, right? It's made a huge difference for me. And I find that very gratifying, very satisfying. Like for me, that's really where the passion comes from. This is about helping people and moving the needle with people.
You wonder if there's some kind of application for this, you know, like career counselors at high schools or something like that, setting young people, kind of combining their personalities, their past, all these pieces that you've talked about, and kind of maybe pointing them in the right direction. Because I know for me as a young person, I wasn't quite sure when I left high school, and many people probably aren't, what I wanted to do. So is there anything around that?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like, absolutely. And I would say that if I look back, I go, a lot of the problems that we talk about start when kids are like 14, right? Because at 14, they're starting to be asked to pick their path for what becomes their career. Which courses are you going to take? Where are you going to go? And then all of a sudden they've head down headed down a path and they can't get off of it. And so for me, it's like, how do we help get kids pointed in the right direction as early as possible? And the right direction will be different for every one of those kids.
Yeah.
There are some, so the caution here is you also don't want to predefine where everyone goes up front. It's not like we have a magic wand to wave. And sometimes when kids are still young, there's still a lot of things that they're still trying to figure out about where they go. But I do think we could be much, much better, much earlier about helping them think this way, be open to the different paths that they could take, and being aware of more information and more about themselves to help guide and define where they go from there.
Yeah, definitely. So very cool. Well, it's an interesting discussion, and I love the work you're doing over at CareerSpark, and everybody listening can check it out at CareerSpark.com. Any parting words, anything we didn't talk about or cover that you'd like to leave us with as we wind down the interview?
No, not at all. If one
Sure.
simple plug, and it's more for individuals. I mean, certainly we work with customers, but I would say if you're out there today and you're frustrated with your job and you're frustrated with what you're doing, come to CareerSpark. Come and put your information in the system and see if we can help guide you down a path that makes more sense for you. I'd love to be able to help as many people as we can. So please feel free to try it. It's free, and hopefully it can help you if you're struggling out there right now.
Perfect. All right. Well, it's a good discussion. I hope everybody enjoyed that. Whether you're a leader of an organization or an individual kind of looking for their path, check out CareerSpark.com. And Jamie, thanks so much for coming on and sharing a half an hour or so with us here to talk a little bit about an important thing, which is getting, one, finding your own path in life, and two, how can organizations and leaders put their talent in the right spots? Because as you alluded to, it's a massive issue. I think people are probably the most expensive part of a business. And, if you're a leader, you better hope that they're, in the right spots and that they're happy. And, there's just a win-win on both sides, right? So thank you for sharing some of that information today. And for everybody listening, I hope you enjoyed this interview. We'll link up CareerSpark.com below the video here, or go ahead and check it out if you're listening on audio. And I'll talk to you on the next one. Take care.